In this lesson, we're going to look at blood vessels. And for the first part of the lesson, we're going to explore the different types of blood vessels. We're going to look at the structure of various types of blood vessels and see how they're related to the function of moving blood around the body. Then we're going to look at the structural mechanisms that help blood flow around the body. So we've got blood moving away from the heart, and it moves via certain mechanisms. And then when blood is flowing back to the heart, i.e. back to the heart and lungs, the blood is also under another type of mechanism that helps it flow back to the heart and lungs. So we just need to explore that as well. Now, before we look at the different types of blood vessels, what we're going to just briefly overlook here, we're just going to briefly summarize, is the circulatory system. So the circulatory system in humans and other animals transport nutrients in the blood to all individual respiring cells. So nutrients must be transported to all individual respiring cells. And another way to actually see this network of the circulatory system is that every cell in our body is said to be within 0.5 millimeters of a capillary vessel. Now we're going to come across the capillaries later, but I just want you to keep that in mind, that every cell in our body is said to be within 0.5 millimeters of a capillary vessel. This means the network of the blood vessels is quite far-reaching, and it needs to be because all respiring cells need nutrients to be transported to them and waste products need to be removed. As we said, in humans and many mammals, the blood vessels are arranged into a double circulatory system. So can you just take these 2 points down first, just as our introduction into blood vessels. First point, nutrients are transported in the blood must reach individual respiring cells. In humans and many mammals, the blood vessels are arranged into a double circulatory system. And we're going to look at in a moment this double circulatory system. I'm going to show you an image for that, but can you just take down these 2 points? And in addition, just as a side note, it's not something that you have to remember, but it's a good way to visualize what's going on in terms of the cellular needs, that every cell in the body is within 0.05 millimeters of a capillary vessel. So if you just want to note that down to a side, that the network of blood vessels looks to cover all of the respiring cells within our body. And this is important because they need nutrients and they need to get rid of waste products. If we look here at the double circulatory system, we can see how this system is separated into 2 main components, and you can see it just by the color difference here. So in our circulatory system, arteries carry blood away from the heart to the organs of the body, and blood returns to the heart via the veins. And the 2 systems, arteries and veins, as you can see here, are linked by capillaries. Now we're going to break down the structure of arteries, veins and capillaries in a bit more detail, but you can see how they come together to form this double circulatory system. Now, what we have to remember about this system, that we can separate the system into a number of segments. And as you can see here, you've got the pulmonary circulation segment, and then you've got the systemic circulation segment. And just by looking at the coloration of the diagram, you can see that we have a red segment and we have a blue segment. Now this diagram is oversimplified because although it is showing the red oxygenated blood flowing and then the blue deoxygenated blood flowing back to the heart and lungs, it's a bit of an oversimplification. So as you look at this simulation here, you can see that, yes, the oxygenated blood and the deoxygenated blood are separated, but they're not separated like at opposite ends of two extreme poles. They are quite close to each other, and you can see here these are arteries and veins flowing in the legs, and you can see on the leg on the right hand side that the vein is quite close to the artery, and you can see that this network is interwoven amongst the muscles as well. And this is going to become important later on when we talk about how the blood flows through the veins. But what you can see is, do not think that the oxygenated blood is on one side of your body and the deoxygenated blood is on the other side. That's not the case. The case is that the blood and veins are quite close to each other in proximity, and you can see that here. So if we can look further and go down towards the knees, you can see that the network becomes, the size of the blood vessels starts to decrease, and you can see that here as well. And then if we go further and look at one of the blood vessels, the arteries, in detail, which we will do, if we go here now, we go into the cross section of the artery, you can see that blood is flowing through the artery here, and we're going to talk a bit more in detail about the structure of this of the arteries, and you should be able to see from looking at this structure how it's going to be different from the veins itself. Here you can see the arterial network, and you can see how it's spread across the body. So we can see the various arteries throughout our body and where we can find their locations. So this is how oxygenated blood is carried around the body. Now, notice how the size of the arteries are also different in certain locations. So if we were to look at some of the arteries, let's say in the hand, we can see that there is a significant difference in terms of their size when we compare the arteries supplying blood to the brain. So these structural differences, they have a reason. There's a reason that arteries are structurally different in certain areas, in certain places of the body. Now, if we just compare the arteries to the veins, and we get this type of image where we are seeing the network of veins. So here you can, I've separated out the arteries, so I've shown you how the arteries are spread across the body. Now you are looking at the veins, and look at the network of veins. Again, they are in almost very identical, similar locations to where the arteries were found. So it's not that we have one side of the body carrying oxygenated blood and the other side of the body carrying deoxygenated blood. Sometimes students make that misconception that it's a network. The two networks are separated in terms of oxygenated blood does not mix with deoxygenated blood. That is a fact. However, it's not that one side of the body is carrying oxygenated blood and the other side of the body is carrying deoxygenated blood. Remember, it's a network spread across the entire body. Okay, so this is the network of your veins. So the veins carry deoxygenated blood. If you want to just look at some of the names of certain veins, you can see them here. And yes, because there's quite a lot of them, it's a lot to take in. However, as I repeat again, you do not need to remember many of these the names of these veins. They're just for you as a reference, so you can see that there are, again, specific names for veins that are found in your body. So you can just take a look at some of these veins that are spread throughout the body. Just as our arteries had specific names, we also have certain veins in our body that are carrying, so we have names for each specific major vein in the body. And notice the location, the regions of the body that these veins are carrying the deoxygenated blood from. So veins carrying deoxygenated blood represented in blue. Now this is the double circulatory system, then both networks put together, and we can see now where how the oxygenated blood is carried in the system and the deoxygenated blood, how it's carried in the double circulatory system. So these are the veins and arteries, both networks together. So we can see both networks of veins and arteries together, and this is the double circulatory system. Here you can see the capillary network. So the image to the bottom right hand side of your screen shows a blood capillary vessel, and in relation to the double circulatory system you can see where the arteries and the veins are connected by the capillary network. And the diagram on the bottom right hand side of your screen is showing you how the body cells are positioned in relation to the blood capillaries, and also how the alveoli, the air sac in the lungs, how they are also positioned close to capillaries. So the diagram quickly shows you how capillaries are important to transport nutrients to respiring cells, body cells in the body, and also how you can see that the CO2, the waste products of respiration, are moving into the blood capillary network and into the blood plasma and into the red blood cells. And then you can also see how the same process of movement of substances in and out of the capillary network and in and out of the cell, in and out of the red blood cells, occurs in the lung. And here you can see one section of the lung, and it occurs in the lungs, and these are the air sacs. So this is the capillary network in relation to the double circulatory system, which you can see on the top left hand corner of your screen, how this actually looks if you were to go into the capillary network. So if you want to make a note or a quick sketch of the capillary network, you can, to show that it is very you can see that it's accommodating single cells, and how this makes sure that transport of substances in and out of cells is more efficient. And we're going to talk about this in more detail. So if you don't take it down now, you will need to take it down later on. But this rough diagram of the capillary network is important. Second part of the circulatory system, there's transport, where the transport of blood is where the blood is carried from the heart to all other organs of the body and back again to the heart. So the other transport system is where blood from the heart is transported to all other organs of the body and respiring cells. So to all other body organs, and it comes back again and returns back to the heart. Okay, so this is the second part of the double circulatory system, where blood from the heart is pumped to. So could you just amend your sentence there? So in the second part of the circulation is where the transport system is where blood from the heart is pumped to all other body organs and returns back to the heart. Now, as it leaves the heart in this second part of the circulation, all of this is oxygenated blood, and it's going off to all of the different various parts of the organs in the body and to the respiring cells, where it will give up the oxygen to those respiring cells, and then it becomes deoxygenated. So when it returns, on its return journey back to the heart, it has now become deoxygenated blood. So can you just make a note of this sentence there? You can put it in your own words, or you can take it down from there. The other transport system is where blood from the heart is pumped to all other body organs and returns back to the heart. Now, the double circulation that we just briefly summarized is important for warm-blooded and active animals such as humans. It makes our circulatory system more efficient, as it allows for oxygenated blood to return to the heart from the lungs, and then this blood can be sent off to different parts of the body at high pressure. So as the heart pumps the blood is sent off around the body at higher pressure. So this ensures that more areas of your body can receive fully oxygenated blood quickly. So this is in essence the double circulation that we've just summarized here, where blood is returned from the lungs. First it's pumped to the lungs, picks up oxygen, returns back to the heart, and then it's pumped at high pressure from the heart to different parts of the body so that oxygenated blood can reach respiring cells. So here you can just quickly have an overview of the double circulatory system, and if you just focus on those 4 units, you can see how they pass through this double circulatory system, where it's pumped to the lungs, becomes oxygenated, flows back to the heart, and from the heart oxygenated blood pumped around the body, and then back to the heart, back to the lungs again, and the whole system is repeated in this way. And notice the color of those 4 cells, of the red blood cells, as they pass through. So it's not as clear, but you can see there is a slight difference in the color, so representing oxygenated blood and deoxygenated blood. So this just gives a quick overview again of the double circulatory system. As a quick task for now, what I want you to do on Teams, I want you to type the correct answer back on Teams for each of these labels. So here, so if I put this as A, I want you to tell me what A is representing, what 2 words would best describe A. Okay, and then here I want you to describe this segment here as B. So what is A representing and what is B representing? So we've got the double circulatory system. I don't want a description. I would like a name of what A would represent and what B would represent. Could you type back your answers or what you think the answers could be? That best, so just a one word answer or 2-word answer that describes A, and then the same for B. Could you type your answers back on Teams? Now we're going to look at the structure of the blood vessels. Now, before we start and look at each type of blood vessel in detail. I'm going to give you an overview of the blood vessels, how they appear in the double circulatory system. So here you can see how arteries, veins and capillaries are arranged in our double circulation. And as I mentioned earlier in the simulation, the size of veins and the size of arteries amongst themselves also vary. And when we compare arteries and veins, there's also a difference. So you just have to be aware that not all arteries are the same and not all veins are the same. And further, not all capillaries are the same. And when we compare between the vessels also, we also see stark differences. So before we start, I just wanted to show you here. So from this image, you can see the different types of veins and the different types of arteries, and also the main differences between the blood vessels as well, i.e. between veins and arteries. Now there's more information here than you need, and I've taken off the irrelevant information which makes it more difficult to process. So I've given you a simplified version of the diagram, but what I'm going to do here on this diagram is just to label it according to what you will need. So just let's have a quick overview of the blood vessels based on what we are going to cover. All right, okay, so if we just go and look at the artery, what we say here is the outer wall is quite thick. So we say that this is the thick wall here. So arteries have thick walls. Okay, they have a particular name, but you do not need to know those names in detail. So they have thick walls. Arteries have thick walls. Then if we go one layer in, we say that it's a thick layer of muscle and elastic fiber. So it's mentioned above internal elastic membrane, but you can summarize it and say thick layer of muscle and elastic fiber. Okay, so that's the artery. Now this is essentially the same as we go down, but you can see as we go further down the circulation, the double circulatory system diagram, you can see that the size of the arteries also begin to change as well. So muscular artery, for example, is slightly different to the elastic artery that you're seeing above. And as we move across now to the veins, so let's now look at the veins. Now you can see here straight away there is already a difference between the artery and the vein in terms of the lumen, the size of the hole, the open part of the blood vessel. There is a difference. Sorry, yeah, I didn't mention, there was one more label I missed off on the artery. So going back to the artery, we say that arteries have small lumen. This is where the blood will flow through the lumen. Okay, now comparing that to the vein, what we say is that in comparison to the artery, they have relatively thin walls. In comparison to the artery. Okay, because we do have to now, when we go further to the capillaries, we will say that there's even the thinness of the walls reduces dramatically. But in comparison to the artery, veins have relatively thin walls. Now, if you do a quick comparison with the artery with the vein in terms of lumen, you can see that the lumen is much larger. So we say that lumen is larger. Okay, in comparison to the artery, the lumen is larger in the vein. And their veins tend to veins will also have valves to prevent backward flow of blood. So the next point is, what we say is, have valves. Now it's not represented in the diagram. We will look at valves in the heart and in veins, but veins tend to have valves to prevent backward flow of blood. And you don't get valves in the heart, you get valves in the veins. So this is a quick side-by-side comparison of veins and arteries. And if we move further down, we see the capillary network. And what we say about capillaries is that they have a narrow lumen. They have a much smaller lumen than arteries. So to say this, we say narrow lumen. Okay, and walls are a single cell thick. So can we say that? Walls, single cell thick. Okay, so you can see the quick overview of the blood vessels in terms of their structural differences if we were to look at arteries, veins and capillaries. As I said, I've taken off a lot of information that you don't need here, but you do need to be able to quickly identify how arteries and veins and capillaries differ from each other just by a quick visual examination of a diagram. You should be able to identify it. If you're not seeing it from this diagram, I'm going to show you another diagram here, which is showing you a quick comparison between an artery, vein and a capillary. So these are cross sections through each of the types of blood vessels, and you can see here. So if you want to take down a diagram of a quick representation of arteries, veins and capillaries, can you take this down and ensure that you label it correctly? So this is just another way to see it, taken away from the whole double circulatory system and just showing you a quick cross-sectional area of arteries, veins and capillaries. As I said, for your exam, you will need to be confident in identifying these types of blood vessels without any labels, just by the image. Now, we're just going to summarize what the artery is and what its function is. So I'm just going to bullet point a few notes that I want you to take down. So can you take this down as we work it through? Refer to the diagrams if you get stuck in terms of being able to visualize what I'm talking about. So I've given you the cross-section area in comparison to the other blood vessels, how the blood vessels are arranged in terms of the double circulatory system, and the diagram right at the bottom gives you a quick overview of the double circulatory system. Right, okay, so let's start. Arteries carry blood away from your heart to the organs of the body. So, carry blood away from the heart to the organs of the body. Okay, so arteries carry blood away from the heart to the organs of the body. Now, the blood is under high pressure in arteries. Blood is under high pressure. And is bright red in color because it is oxygenated. So the blood is under high pressure. It is bright red. Bright red due to being oxygenated. Okay, so arteries carry blood away from the heart to the organs of the body, to the rest of the body. The blood is under high pressure, bright red due to being oxygenated. And once it passes through the artery, so as blood is pushed through the artery under high pressure from the heart, it changes shape. So the arteries stretch as the blood is forced through them. But after it's passed a certain section of the artery, that artery returns back to its original shape. So the arteries will stretch as blood flows through them, and then it returns back to its original shape once the blood has passed that region. So the last few points of arteries, and I've just put it into words here, that the arteries stretch as the blood is forced through them. They return back to their original shape. So they return back to their original shape afterwards. And this stretching of the arteries, if any artery is near the surface of the skin, this can be felt. And for example, in certain locations like the wrist, and we call this a pulse, and we can feel this as a pulse. So these are just a few points of arteries I want you to take down. Now, looking at the diagram, I want you to answer a quick question back on Teams. What specific structural component of an artery allows it to stretch and return back to normal as blood is pumped through it under high pressure? So that's the first quick question I want you to answer. So I'll repeat again on Teams. I just want you to answer this question. So can you put down the section which this question is coming from, i.e. arteries, and could you just put down this question as question A? What component of the artery allows for it to stretch as blood is pumped through it under high pressure and return back to normal? So just put down arteries A, and can you just write down your answer for that part? Part B, so the second question for this section, I want you to type back on Teams, is to tell me why or how the blood is kept, or how the blood is maintained at high pressure in the arteries. So what two structures or two structural components of the artery allow for the blood to be maintained at a high pressure as it flows through the artery system? Let us now look at the veins. So quick summary of the veins. Veins carry blood away from the organs towards your heart. And the blood is generally a deep purple-red colour due to it having a low oxygen content. We say it is deoxygenated blood. There is no pulse in veins simply because there is low pressure now. So it's not the pulse is due to the heart pushing blood under high pressure. The pumping action of the heart pushing blood through the arteries results in the pulse being felt. Veins do not have this because the nutrients have been delivered to the respiring tissues via the capillary network, and now the blood is making its way back to the heart. It's not under the same pressure, so therefore there's no pulse. Veins have thin walls in comparison to arteries, and they have valves inside them to prevent backward flow of blood. Blood is squeezed back towards the heart by the action of skeletal muscles. So I'm just going to now show you a simulation of how the veins are located close to or in between skeletal muscles to allow the blood to be squeezed back to the heart. Before we do that, can you take down these summary points for veins now? So before we move on, can you take down these summary points for veins? Looking at this simulation of the skeletal muscles, I want you just to focus your attention here at how the skeletal system moves and how the muscles are moving. So just look at the movement of muscles as you move the arm and notice this movement. Now look at the movement of the muscles in relation to the skeletal system here. So now we're going to relate this to the veins in our circulatory system. I want you to think about what would happen if we were to place veins in between the skeletal muscles. So look at the mode of action of these muscles and what would happen if we were to place veins in between the skeletal muscles. And look how the muscles are moving. And if we were to place veins in between these muscles, what would happen? And bear in mind, the goal of veins is to get the blood, the deoxygenated blood, back to the heart so the heart can pump it to the lungs for it to be oxygenated. So just look at the action of the muscles and think about what would happen if we were to place the veins in between skeletal muscles. So look at the action of the muscles, look how they're moving and placing veins between. What you can see here is the action of the valves within the veins, and you can see that they close and they prevent backward flow of blood. And how this happens in relation to the movement of the skeletal muscles can be seen in this next diagram. Here you can see blood flowing back to the heart through a vein. You can see where the valves are located, and you can see that the vein is between two muscles, two skeletal muscles. And when there's contraction and relaxation of the muscles, this helps the blood flow back to the heart. It squeezes the blood back to the heart for it to pump the blood then to the lungs and to be oxygenated. So this is deoxygenated blood flowing back to the heart. Notice how the action of the muscles is squeezing the blood back to the heart. So as you move the muscles, as the muscles are moved, as the limbs are moved, this aids with the flow of blood back to the heart by squeezing the blood through the veins. You can see a clearer diagram next of how the blood appears when the valves are open and when the valves are closed. So in this diagram, we can see how when the skeletal muscles are relaxed, look at the valves. And when we see that there's a contracted skeletal muscles, we can see that one of the upper valves open, and as the blood is forced through, it opens up the valves and the blood is squeezed forward towards the heart. So this is a role of contraction and relaxation of skeletal muscle to aid in the flow of blood back to the heart. And the valves are essential to prevent backward flow of blood. Because as the muscles squeeze, as the muscles contract the vein, there's every chance that blood could flow in the opposite direction. And to prevent this, these valves, the way they are constructed and shaped, will prevent the valves from opening in the reverse direction. But what it also does the way they are shaped and the way they are constructed, you can see that as the blood is forced towards the heart, it will push open the valve at the top, at the valve above, and this way blood is squeezed back to the heart and it doesn't flow backwards. So the last type of blood vessel we're going to look at are the capillaries. There are a network of tiny vessels that link the arteries and the veins. The capillaries are narrow with very thin walls. Oxygen and glucose diffuse out of the blood and into the cells. Carbon dioxide and other waste products produced by the cells pass into the blood via the walls of the capillary. And they're efficient because the walls of the capillaries are very thin. They're 1 cell thick, and it also has a very narrow lumen. So this again allows for efficient diffusion in and out of substances. So for the final part of this lesson, I want you to answer these exam questions on a separate document and upload them back to Teams. What I'm going to do is, you're going to see for the next minute or so exam questions appearing. As they appear, I want you to pause the video. I want you to type up your answer on a Word document, the correct answer for each question. So label the question and the correct answer. And then I would like you to upload that document back to me on Teams. So this is the first question. Pause the video here and answer the questions to the best of your ability onto a separate document. And then another question will appear. I want you to pause the video then, answer the question, and as you work your way through the next few exam questions.